What's up, guys? I wanted to create a tutorial today to show you how to automatically scroll in SwiftUI. We're going to use something called a ScrollViewReader, and the idea is, let's say you're creating a social media app. You want your comments to automatically scroll down as you create more comments, right? So you create a comment, you submit it, and then your app scrolls to the bottom of the comment list so you see where your comment stands relative to the other ones. Just kind of that simple functionality. And so that's what I'm going to show you today. So I have a SwiftUI app here. I just created it. I didn't do anything to it yet. And we'll build like the sort of skeletal framework for what we want. So the idea is we want to have a list of items. So here, let's say, we have a couple of these text objects. So this is what our items are going to look like. Whoops. And we're going to put them into a VStack. Copy and paste. All right. And we'll add a spacer. And then on the bottom, we'll put a button. And so I'll select this action and label completion. The action we'll put in later. And for the label, I'm going to say, I want it to be called, let me scroll down here so we can see it a little better. So we'll call it add new item. And I'll give it a foreground color. Color.primary. I don't like blue buttons. It seems very 1998 to me. Padding. Overlay. And for the overlay, I want to do this so I can create a rounded-ish border around my object. So I'll create a rounded rectangle, and I'll add a corner radius. Let's say 20. And I'll give it a stroke, which means don't draw the whole thing, just draw the edges of it. Whoops. And line width of 5. All right, so we gave it a color and we gave it a line width. And so this is what our whole app is going to look like. This is all the design that we're going to do. The idea here is that we're going to click this add new item button or we're going to tap it with our finger or whatever, and new items are going to get added to our list. And then once the list gets really long, it's going to start scrolling to the bottom of the list. So how do we implement that logic? I'm going to do this in a Mvvm structure, the model, view, and view model. And so what that means is we have our view over here, but the actual logic behind our app is going to be in the model and in the view model. So I'm going to create a new folder here using, what is this, Option Command N, and I'll call it models. And I'll create a new folder as well and call it view models. So I want to have a model for these items that I'm adding in here, and appropriately and simply, I'm just going to call this thing item. All right, we'll call it item. It'll be a struct item. And I'm going to make it two things. I'm going to make it identifiable, and I'm going to make it hashable. And this is important for when you want to basically iterate through anything in a SwiftUI view. The SwiftUI view has to be able to identify this object as different from other objects that hold similar types of data. The way we're going to do this is we're going to add an ID variable. And so this ID is going to be a string, and we're automatically going to instantiate it. It's going to be a UUID, which is this automatic ID that will never get replicated, and we are going to convert this UUID object to a string. Super simple. And then we're going to add a text field here, and that'll be a string as well. And we'll even write a pretty init thing for this, which we don't actually need to do, but I'll do it anyway. We'll initialize it with just a text, and we'll say self.text equals text. We don't need to add the ID because we're automatically initializing it right here. Okay? All right, so that's our model. And then we're going to have a view model. So I'll add a file here, also a Swift file. This one is going to be called content view model. And it will be a class. I'm going to call it final class content view model. And it will be of type observable object. It needs to be of type observable object to be able to be viewed and the changes of it viewed from inside of our content view over here. So like I said, it's going to have the logic for everything we need. So in this case, it's just going to have the ability to add objects to our array of items, and it's going to actually store the array of items. So I'm going to give it a published variable. I'm going to call it item array, and it's going to be of type item. And we're going to instantiate that over here. Let's see, now type item equal to an array of items that we're going to instantiate. And I'll give it a function, func add item to array, or just add item. We're not going to pass any data here. The item will be automatic. And in this function, we'll just say item array dot append, or append new element. We'll call it new item. And so this new item, let new item equals item. And we'll give it some text. So we'll say new list item. All right. So that's our entire content view model, at least for now. And so we can go back to our content view and figure out what to do. So we're going to have this list of objects. I want to keep this connected so I make sure I don't make typos in my code. We're going to have a list of objects here, list of these item objects, and I want to iterate through all of them. So we already have this VStack, and I'm going to delete this text stuff, and I'm going to add a for each loop. And in this for each loop, oh, and actually before that, I'm going to, so in here, I want my items, right? And I want to iterate through all of these items. It's going to be like item in, and then whatever I have here. But what I forgot to do is add my content model here. So I'm going to add at observed object var content VM equals content view model, and I'll instantiate that here. And when we add something like that there, we can now call it over here. So I'll say, oops, content VM dot item array, and that'll produce our list of items. And with this list of items, we're going to create different things, and they are going to be boring old text fields for now, for our purposes. So it'll be just be item.text inside a text field, and then like before, we'll add padding to the text, just so they're separate enough. All right. And so we have our list of items here. It shouldn't actually show anything because our list of items is empty. I'm going to clean build my app over here so it starts working again. And I'm going to start adding a little bit more logic. So, all right, so try again. So I want our button over here to add these new items. So I'm going to go to, okay, so this works. Our list is empty, just like we want. So the button is going to have an action, and we'll call the action did tap add item button. And that's a simply named function. It's not complex. I'm not saying add a new item with this button. I'm just saying the button was tapped because this is the content view, not the content view model. And so I'll create a function, and it'll say did tap add item button. And from here, I'm going to call the background logic. So I'll say content VM dot add item. All right. And so I can test this now. I'm going to build this again. Hit live preview. And what happens when I add new items? It adds items to my list. Beautiful. And when I keep adding stuff, my button goes off screen, everything gets messed up. Okay, so my first mistake is I didn't put the stuff in a scroll view. If I just put it in a vertical stack, everything's gonna leave, all right? So the stuff that I actually want to scroll, I'm gonna hit stop on this. I'm gonna put in a scroll view. So this for each list, I'm gonna command click on it, and there's no embed in scroll view, but one easy thing is just to say group. And so embed it in a group, and I'm gonna rename this group to scroll view. All right. And so what this is gonna do, and I'm gonna put the spacer inside the scroll view. Am I gonna put the spacer inside the scroll view? Yes, I will. I think I will. All right, and so I'll add that again. I'll hit new item a bunch of times. All right, perfect. So we get new items added to our list, and now our problem is that the list just does not scroll. The logic is almost there, and so at this point, all we need to add is something called a ScrollViewReader. And a ScrollViewReader has a couple of things to it, but basically it needs to know which item in your list of things in your vertical stack, whatever it needs to scroll to. And so that is related to why we gave this thing an identifiable and a hashable trait, because we actually want to pull its ID to scroll to it. So I'm going to add a scroll function, func scroll to bottom. Now, I'm putting this in the view, not the view model, because I feel like this really only has to do with the kind of behavior of the screen and not with the data behind it. I might be wrong, or people might disagree, but this is how I prefer to do it. When we're talking about models changing actual data in the background of the app, then that goes in the view model. But something like scrolling the screen, for me, I think it's the logic is not complicated. I keep it in the view itself. And so we have the scroll to bottom function. I'm going to populate it in a sec. But for scrolling, there's a couple of things we need. So first of all, we need a ScrollViewReader. I'm going to put the ScrollViewReader inside the scroll view. So here I'm going to command click on this for each, and I'm going to embed it in a group, and then I'm going to rename the group ScrollViewReader. And ScrollViewReader gets this value coming out of it, and this value is called a proxy. Or we can call the value a proxy. You can call it scroll view, you can call it whatever. And what we're going to do with this proxy value is we are going to save it in our view. So I'm going to add a state variable here, state private var, and I'm going to call it scroll proxy. And it's going to be of type scroll view proxy. And at first it's just going to be nil. All right, so we're going to instantiate it when we're setting up our view. So what we're going to say here is cannot find proxy. What are you doing? Annoying me. Oh, proxy in. All right. So as we instantiate our for each list, I'm going to add an onAppear function over here. And just add a completion to it. So once this appears, I'm going to say scroll proxy. So the variable, the state variable that's on top, I'm going to set it equal to this proxy. And so then this scroll proxy is what I'm going to use to figure out where I want to go in my list of items. And so there's a couple more things I need to do. So let's see. We want to know when should we call this scroll to bottom function. We have a couple of ways of doing it. We can scroll to bottom whenever we add a new item. But I'd say a better way to do it is actually to listen to the changes in the list of items. Let's say they changed in the back end of your server, and then scroll if that happens. So in our case, we're going to do it like that, right? It might be a little bit annoying for the user, but this is the example that we're going to go with. So I'm going to go to this vstack here. It doesn't really matter where we put this on change, but I'm going to put it at the bottom of our stuff on change, and on change of our content view model dot item array. So whenever the item array changes, it is going to perform this code. Now I don't actually need to pull the values here. I'm going to make this empty underscore to say I don't need you. We're just going to say scroll to bottom. So whenever item array changes, we scroll all the way to the bottom of our list. Okay. And to actually scroll to bottom, first of all, we want to do it with an animation. We don't want it to immediately jump. So I'm going to say with animation, and I'm going to say scroll proxy dot scroll to, and it automatically puts a question mark after the scroll proxy because it is not necessarily unwrapped. And so where do I actually want to go? And here's where we put the ID of the list where we're going. So I'm going to say content view model VM dot item array dot last. So this is the last item in the array dot ID. All right. And so over here, what it did is pull the ID out of the item array and say scroll to that. And we're going to give it an anchor saying the bottom is where you're actually scrolling. Okay. And so one last thing I believe that I need to do for this to actually work. Well, first of all, so one last thing we need to do is make sure that the IDs, so these little hash IDs, are added on the way that we want to our for each loop over here. So we're going to add a little bit of extra stuff. I'm going to say ID is going to be the ID of the item array. And once I add this text over here, I'm going to give it this ID just to make sure it's using exactly what we want, item.id. So we're tagging this little piece of information with our ID. And so we can hit resume here and see if it works. Are we scrolling? Okay, add new item works. And look at that, it scrolls down, so we can play that in our actual phone preview. So I'm going to bring this over, try to fit it into the screen. And here it loaded up, so we had this add new item button, and I can click away, and bam, it scrolls down and down and down. Absolutely beautiful. All right. And so that is how we can create a list with a ScrollViewReader. So just to kind of go over what we did again, we created this Mvvm structure. We have our model, and that is the item over here. It's an identifiable and a hashable. And we have our content view model. And the content view model has the logic for what our view is doing. So our view is adding an item to whatever our backend server, our list. It's appending it to our array over here. And then we have the content view itself. And so what the content view is doing is showing us this list of stuff. And it has this scroll proxy that we got on the top. And the scroll proxy is instantiated in this onAppear function over here, this chained onAppear function inside this ScrollViewReader. And so the ScrollViewReader is important for this thing, as well as calling the scroll proxy.scroll2 command and giving it the hash ID of the object that we're, the piece of our view that we're actually going to. All right, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I hope it was clear enough. You know, like, comment, subscribe, whatever people do on YouTube. I appreciate it. All right, bye-bye.